Thank you. Um, you just mentioned a lot of variations, or doing a lot of variation. Tiago was at your seminar in Leeds, and you gave him a few accessory exercises. And he was wondering if you normally, with other athletes, use a whole variety of exercises or just a few core exercises.
So everything's dependent on the weakness that the athlete has. If an athlete has a weak lockout, then he would get a certain number of exercises specifically to work that. If someone has a weakness elsewhere, then Boris would recommend exercises specifically for whatever those weaknesses are. Because all athletes are different, the limb lengths and the amount of muscle that they have throughout the body. It's really hard to give all athletes the same exercises because they don't have the same needs. And it's advised to give athletes the exercises that they specifically need for their bodies. So in every case, there's a unique approach. Meaning, to answer the question more directly, he doesn't give a lot of different kinds of exercises to every athlete. He gives certain specific exercises to an athlete over and over so that those weaknesses can become stronger.
Tiago again, or let me put it another way. Boris mentioned that when he was traveling to the US and the UK that he noticed that a lot of lifters were actually doing their deadlifts wrong. They should be in a sumo deadlift position. Are there some common errors Boris sees in Western programming, and what are some of his tips to improve programming in general?
I don't think that he meant wrong. He just meant they were doing conventional, and they may be more it may be more beneficial for them to have been doing sumo.
Oh,
but
sorry.
let me ask Boris the question. What I've noticed is that the biggest errors that I saw when in America and in Russia were in the deadlift. I don't know about other coaches, but for me the most important thing is to teach the correct, most efficient technique for the competition lifts, the deadlift, the squat, and the bench press. And one of the differences that I've noticed with my athletes, Russian athletes and others, is that by the time someone gets to a higher level and is strong, they already have set very good technique. And for those athletes to whom I made remarks and suggestions for their technique, I want to give them one piece of advice, which is to have patience. Because these athletes, just like many others, have performed this technique so much, have performed this trajectory so much that it became an automatic technique. And to start having a better technique, you first have to break down the old bad technique and build the new better technique. And it happens very often that someone that starts to use a new better technique can do the technique perfectly at weights up to 80%, but anything higher than that, and the old technique comes back. And this means that the athlete has put the work in, but has not yet made the new technique automatic. And this is shown in competition, because in competition the athlete is just thinking lift the weight and isn't paying attention to the details of how they're going to lift it. And that's when the technique that has the technique that the athlete does automatically comes out. So when reteaching someone, do not right away go to heavy weights. We first work a lot on 50, 60, 70% weights, and only when the technique is good at the 70% weights can we start to add possibly 75 and 80% weights. And because it takes a lot of reps and a lot of time to develop a new technique, it usually takes somewhere between a month and a half to 2 months for it to solidify and become automatic. I was asked to give a recommendation on specifically programming, but I can't give a recommendation without seeing the specific athlete, what they look like, how they currently train, and what their technique looks like. And for instance, with the athletes that I coach online, they send me a lot of videos, and I write back to them telling them what they need to focus on, what the mistake was, and what the focus should be.